rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick Thomas. Oh, a disappointing start to the day today. While I was hoping to see a bunch of, a slew of opinions come out from the Supreme Court, they only gave us 2. Out of the 6 or so cases that were left that I discussed last night, they only gave us 2. 2, which one of them, honestly, was not exactly the response that I was hoping for from the Supreme Court. I mean, they basically chickened out, is what they did. They freaking chickened out. They figured out a way to get away from a potential problem prior to the election. And, they freaking chickened out. Now, of course, this doesn't stop the lawsuit that this stemmed from. All this does is stop the injunction that was put forth. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual case. It just, they're going to kick it back to the lower courts and let the lower courts kind of work it out a little bit more. But anyway, I got some more on that here in just a minute. Also, I've got some things about the upcoming debate tomorrow, as well as some things on our economy and that kind of thing. So there we go for you for tonight. But first, let's go ahead and have my news from Rumble. My news is going to lead us in tonight's Pledge of Allegiance. So please, if you are of mind, please stand. And, of course, remove your hat if you have one. Otherwise, put your hand over your heart and join in with my news in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic of which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, My News, for that wonderful rendition. If you would like to hear yourself give the pledge, you can certainly do so by recording yourself and your style, however it is, and send me the audio file. And once you do that, of course, you can send it off to me. And once you do, I will go ahead and put it on and put it into the rotation. You can send it to me to my email at fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective, all one word, .online. And, of course, I forgot to mention that tonight I also have a wonderful pet of the week for tonight's, the ending of tonight's show for the segment. Also, tonight is, of course, Whiskey Wednesday. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. And tonight I am drinking out of the Wild Turkey 101 bottle. It's getting down there. I'm going to have to get a new one here sometime in the near future. But I've got a couple others. And, of course, I am drinking it out of the old-fashioned rocks, whatever you want to call it, True Grit Roots Network glass, decked out in American patriotic colors. And there we go. And, of course, I have my whiskey stones in the bottom there. All right. Speaking of True Grit Roots Network, let me tell you about one of our shows called Cruising, or Cruisin', because, you know, you drop the G off. Cruisin' on the Blues Highway. This is put together by one of our fabulous on-air personalities, Pat Mighty Quinn. And Pat says about Cruisin' on the Blues Highway, he says this: I have always been a fan of the blues and blues rock going back to the late 60s. My two older sisters introduced me to several artists and bands like Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, and then in the 1970s, I discovered so much more. I learned a lot from the blues greats back then. You'll hear a lot of guitar-driven artists on my show, which a number of listeners have told me how much they appreciate that I feature these types of artists they can't hear or find on other stations. The blues is here to stay. I guarantee that. So come join Mighty Quinn on his show Cruisin' on the Blues Highway exclusively at True Grit Roots Network, TGRN Blues. It airs Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Time. So once again, that's Cruisin' on the Blues Highway with Pat Mighty Quinn, and you can catch that Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Central Time right here on True Grit Roots Network, TGRN Blues. You can listen to us by going to tgrn.net and listening straight through your browser, or you can download our app, or you can find us in the Live 365 catalog of digital radio stations, to include iHeart as well as Odyssey. That's AUDACY. You can find us there as well in their catalog too. So plenty of places to listen to TGRN Blues. TGRN Blues, part of the True Grit Roots Network, based out of Austin, Texas. All right. So let's get right into it. So this free speech case, it turned into Murphy versus Missouri. And what essentially happened is that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals went and essentially did an injunction that prevented the federal government from interacting with social media companies. Now, all of this has stemmed from the whole COVID misinformation situation, and also expanded a little bit into the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story as well. So there's a lot of stuff that the government did back in 2020 in trying to, of course, dispel what they considered misinformation and disinformation and all of that other stuff. But in reality, what that basically breaks down to is it breaks down to a violation of essentially the First Amendment. See, the thing about the First Amendment is it prohibits the federal government from censoring an American's speech. And the thing about it is that while a lot of people complain about the idea, well, you know, that's they're not censoring their speech. They're censoring you on a platform. Well, that's the point of the definition of platform. So what a lot of people don't understand is that what keeps Facebook and YouTube and X and even Rumble out of some of the legal ramifications when it comes to having people like myself go and post things online is under the Telecommunications Act. They call themselves platforms rather than publishers. See, if you were a publisher, such as the Washington Post, the New York Post, the Washington Examiner, any of those kinds of places, and you posted something online that was demonstrably false, then as a publisher, you have the potential to be sued over that. And the thing about it is that a lot of people don't understand is that these are platforms, not publishers. A publisher could get sued for printing what would be considered slanderous or liable information. And so that's part of the reason why they go through and have an editorial staff that is supposed to vet and ensure that everything that is posted on their websites and such is accurate information. Whereas a platform gets around that under Section 230 with the idea that, hey, we can't be held responsible for what the public posts. And so as a part of that, what they do also is they do some type of moderation. They claim that they attempt to do moderation, but I can guarantee you that Facebook has been taken to court before where you have situations of child pornography and other nefarious things going on the platform, and they have prevented themselves from being sued over that, even though they attempt to try and cut it back, or so they say. They certainly are not being held liable in the legal sense because, again, they have the ability to say that, hey, under Section 230, they have the ability to say, well, we're just a platform. We can't be responsible for what our users post. And so this is where things kind of get a little sticky because it was a concentrated effort in a lot of cases for people like an example is Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino essentially stated on the air that masks, those paper masks that the paper and the cloth masks that everybody was wearing, essentially put out the information that they are not a good prohibitor of the COVID-19 virus, that they don't prevent infection and spreading of the virus. Now, we have since found out that that is true, that wasn't a falsehood. However, back then, a lot of people considered it a falsehood, and YouTube in particular went and pulled Dan Bongino, of course, after he had already said, screw you and left, but still, they had pulled Dan Bongino and demonetized him to keep him from spreading that, what they thought was misinformation. And so that is actually kind of what spouted and spawned the places such as Rumble. Now, X also did their censorship, but they did it on the New York Post when Miranda Devine wrote the fantastic article with regards to the Hunter Biden laptop as the October surprise right in front of 2020's election. And so all of these things kind of got wrapped into this case, although this was mostly about the COVID-19 suppression of information, because there were a lot of good doctors that were basically saying things like, well, don't necessarily trust the vaccines. Yes, you can use ivermectin or hydrochloroquine, or hydroxychloroquine, I should say, HCQ. And you can use those as preventative medicines and so on and so forth. And they were, the government was furious with them. And they have, in the case, they have several communiques from the FBI to these social media platforms, from other government entities and officials, basically trying and suggesting, in air quotes, suggesting that that the platform censor or remove what the government was deeming as misinformation. So anyway, long story kind of wrapping up here, there was an injunction put on by the federal judge in the case, and the injunction was what was appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. And this injunction was essentially what the Supreme Court was deciding on, and kicked it back to the lower courts for further review based on what the Supreme Court had decided. Now, here's the problem. And this is really where I get into the crux of the problem. You know, the left keeps talking about the Supreme Court and keeps saying, oh, it's a conservative court. It is not a conservative court. We have literally 2 conservative justices on the court. That is Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. We have 4 that are sort of kind of, blow with the wind type individuals, and especially Chief Justice John Roberts, who is very, very specific whenever he issues opinions or recommends that opinions are issued. He gets very upset when it comes down to constitutional issues. And so most of the issues that he wants issued from the Supreme Court, or most of the opinions he wants issued from the Supreme Court, are very, very narrow. They are not designed to be broad-based, coverage. They are very specific. And so what ends up happening is you end up getting these mealy-mouth mishmash opinions from the Supreme Court that have some serious problems. Now, if Clarence Thomas was the Supreme Court Chief Justice, believe me, things would be a lot different. And, unfortunately, the Chief Justice chair is been interpreted as being a position on the court, or in the particular case, a particular seat on the court, and not where it would be going to whoever is the most senior justice on the court, which right now would be Clarence Thomas. Now, the problem that we have here is those 4 justices can generally split. Oh, and I can't forget that the fact that we have the other 3 justices who are literally activists in the form of Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson. We all know where they're going to go. They do not waver, change, or do any of this other stuff. They always constantly, go to the activist side. Whatever side that activism is going to end up being on, that's where they're going to go. So we are pretty much guaranteed that 5 of these justices are going to rule the way that you think that they would. And that's exactly what happened here. The problem is that those other 4 tend to kind of maneuver themselves away or around because of the fact that they just sort of go blow with the wind. And they're going to essentially protect the institution of the government over actually issuing constitutional answers to what's going on. And the thing about it is that what ended up happening is Chief Justice John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and Kavanaugh, 3 of the 4 wishy-washy ones, jumped in bed with the activists and decided to take the essentially, in my opinion, the cowardly way out and just say, they don't have standing. And so we're going to dismiss this based on not having standing. Now, a lot of people look at that and they think, oh, okay, they dismissed it over standing. That means it's over. It actually isn't. All that means is that because this is just over the injunction and not over the actual case, this goes back down to the lower courts, and the lower courts have to work out some of the details. And then eventually, and I would guess more than likely is going to happen, it will eventually end up in front of the Supreme Court. Now, the good news is that Justice Alito and Alito and Thomas, who were joined by Gorsuch, the 4th wishy-washy justice, they actually, and Alito wrote the dissenting opinion, where he asks the question as a part of the dissenting opinion. He says, well, I think we've made a mistake here. And I think that this is a very important First Amendment situation, which is true. But he basically says, I think we've hit a First Amendment violation, and this is something that we're going to regret passing on. I agree with him. So do just about every other individual, American constitutional individual, who goes and, yeah. So anyway, it's going to be a while for this to work its way back up to the Supreme Court. So don't expect this to come back around until potentially after the election anyway. But yeah, this is going to be, yeah, this was definitely a failure on this court to honestly do something that would have been completely constitutional in my mind, and in just about any other legal analyst's mind who is an actual constitutionalist. Not saying that I'm a legal analyst, but there you go. But anyway, because there is plenty of evidence that demonstrates that the FBI may have not overtly said, if you don't do this, we're going to raid your business or take your business away. But it was pretty well known that they were in bed and working with, at the time, particularly the leftist leaning tech companies who are essentially doing all of this. So, yeah, it's kind of a crappy situation, but hey, we'll get it. I mean, eventually it'll come back around, and I guarantee you that when it does, we're going to have some serious questions with regards to this. So, anyway. All right, let's move on. Tomorrow night, of course, is the Biden-Trump debate. And the Biden-Trump debate has gone with Biden hiding out at Camp David for the last several days. He left, I think it was last Thursday. And he essentially has 16 advisors and is practicing standing up. Wait, what? He's practicing standing up? I stand up all day for my job. I have a standing desk. I'm standing right now. How do you practice standing up? Well, apparently Joe Biden is so feeble in his age that he has to practice standing up, according to this report from Hot Air. And you know, it's also reported that 16 aides are there working as advisors, preparing for the debate. That seems like quite a lot. And Camp David is also being turned into a television production set so that Joe Biden can get used to standing on a stage with the hot lights. So at Camp David, reportedly, a movie theater and an airplane hangar have been outfitted with lights and production equipment to create a mock debate stage. And at least 16 current and former aides summoned from Washington and Wilmington whiz back and forth on golf carts to join President Biden in strategy sessions. So Ron Klain is managing the debate preparations. He helped Obama after Obama's terrible performance during his first debate against Mitt Romney in 2012. The goal, of course, is to position President Biden as the president running for re-election and as a fighter who can counterpunch on the fly. Well, that's a bigger lift than what a lot of people realize. But anyway, Trump, on the other hand, he wings it all the time. He can stand and talk to reporters for as long as they have questions. And part of the debate prep, again, for Biden is to practice standing for 90 minutes, as he will have to do so tomorrow night. And yeah, we know that that potentially could be a bit of a problem. Now, Biden's surrogates, of course, are insisting that Biden is sharp and doing well as he does this. And David Axelrod even suggested that the rust factor between the two of them is real. And he was talking, I guess, on a show, and he was saying neither of these guys is accustomed to having someone a few feet away grilling them with no defense or no deference. And according to people familiar with the planning at Camp David who were not authorized to speak publicly about it, the work days vary in length and are not rigidly structured. Mr. Biden and his most trusted advisors work on what they think would be the best to refine a practice at the moment. Now, of course, they're hoping that that Biden can remain focused on arguing about policies and also striking out about Trump's character. Now, here's the thing. In all of this, let's be honest, the bar for both these candidates, realistically, is set fairly low. The first bar, of course, is the fact that, can Joe Biden actually stand for 90 minutes without getting lost, confused, and wander off in either his thoughts or his physical appearance there. But for Trump, it's actually even more so, because Trump's bar is essentially, can he hold it together? Can he not get upset? Can he not fall into what a lot of people would call raging Trump and be calm, cool, and collected and hit Joe Biden back where it actually would hurt, which realistically is on his policies, on the things that he's been doing that has caused this country to be in one of the worst economic situations that we've been in 40 years. One of the, the fact that World War III is potentially could break out at any time, that we've been spending money out the yin yang with very little to show for it in the terms of his policies when it comes to things like the electric vehicle charging stations or the rural internet hookups that he obviously has been spending millions and billions on and have had very little forward motion in the last couple of years since he's gotten those things passed. So these are some of the things that Donald Trump is going to have to focus on. And and to be honest with you, are going to be the things that are going to be very important in terms of the decision, if you're even on the fence, between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And honestly, I don't think that even no matter what happens, I honestly don't believe that Joe Biden or Donald Trump are really going to shift anything in terms of people's opinions of them, their potential voting of them, unless one of them does something really, really, really bad. So in other words, if Joe Biden can actually stand long enough and be able to articulate his answers and not stumble, not wander off, he will likely have been considered doing just fine. And the biggest problem, of course, as I pointed out last night, is the fact that it's not just Joe Biden going versus Trump. It's Joe Biden, Jake Tapper, and Dana Bash that are all going up against Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump is going to have to be very much a part of his game. I would love to see calm, cool, controlled, and collected Donald Trump, more so than I want to see the raging bull that he can get to at times and have that come out. I would love to see a calm, cool, collected, and composed Donald Trump before we get into the rest of the election season. And so far, his campaign that he's run, I have to admit, I've been very impressed. It's been very disciplined, very focused, and much different than what he came out with in 2016. So definitely going to have to watch that. Well, there was a question that came out, and of course, a lot of people are saying, hey, what's going to happen if this debate goes really, really bad for Joe Biden? Because there has been some suggestions and some innuendo that has come out in the rumor mill with regards to the fact that it's possible that the Democrats could be setting up to replace Joe Biden. I mean, let's face it, his approval ratings are below 40% across the board. He is not doing well. He's actually bleeding support from his specific voter blocks that he has counted on in order to keep him going, such as the young vote, the black vote, the Hispanic vote. And based on the polling numbers, he's been bleeding out those. In fact, there was one poll that I saw that said that, or that pointed out that Joe Biden, that Joe Biden very well could be at a point where he's losing up to close to 25% of his black vote base. And so this is, there's some suggestions that you would have things like not Joe Biden, but you would have people such as Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton. I've pointed out that Hillary Clinton seems like a good potential because she's starting to like show back up in the press again. There's a lot of people who are talking about and have been demonstrating and talking about Michelle Obama taking the place. Now, Michelle Obama has clearly stated she doesn't want anything to do with that. However, we also have another possibility, and let me go ahead and get to that here in just a second, because Music Man, thank you very much for your Rumble rant. I do appreciate it. He points out it is 30-minute shot time. Guys, I'm not going to be able to survive tomorrow if you do this, but here we go. There we go. That's about the size of a shot. Thank you very much for the Rumble rant. So that's cool. All right. So who could be another person that potentially could come into play? Well, this piece in the American Spectator suggests, yes, folks, he's still here, Mr. Hair Gel himself. Could a Biden debate disaster propel Gavin Newsom to the nomination? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, nobody wants Gavin Newsom, not even California, which doesn't even make any sense to me because California had the opportunity to get rid of his ass and they wouldn't do it. Anyway, so Thursday's debate, if in this piece here in the American Spectator suggests that in Thursday's debate, if he just basically crashes and burns in the whole thing, there is a possibility that they could bring in Gavin Newsom. And, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure that that's the case because let's face it, Gavin Newsom didn't really do the greatest of jobs against a not so hot debater of, Ron DeSantis. Now, Ron DeSantis, when they met, Ron DeSantis had just come off of several debate stages with the rest of the candidates for Republican candidates for president. And unfortunately, it's I just don't see it. Gavin Newsom's got a lot of serious problems when it comes to his own state. He can't even make the pay raise that he was touting and promising for medical personnel to go in. So he's just, I just don't think he's going to do it. I don't think he is going to be able to revitalize what Biden and Kamala Harris has already destroyed. Not to mention the fact, too, keep in mind that if they were to bring in somebody else other than Kamala Harris, that means that the Democrats would be abandoning their whole intersectionality idea. Okay. So that being said, I honestly don't believe that even though a lot of people are talking about him, I honestly don't believe that he's really up there. I just don't. He's got a lot of baggage, not to mention the fact that he's related to Nancy Pelosi. I can't remember specifically in what way. I think he's like a nephew or something like that. But the guy rails and fights against oil, yet he uses like a gallon of it in his hair. So I honestly just don't see how he can reconcile the fact that he has to use just as much petroleum product just to keep his hair slicked back in the whole case here with regards to this. But, anything is possible. And I agree with the idea that if Biden crashes and burns, seriously, if he crashes and burns in this debate, it wouldn't surprise me any if the Democrats did seriously push to get rid of Joe Biden. I really think that they probably would. However, there's some indication that that might not be the case. And the reason why is because of the fact that Obama, who is part of the whole Democrat strategist team, Obama has still, at least to the public eye, been putting Joe Biden, or putting his weight sort of behind Joe Biden. Now, he hasn't come out and explicitly endorsed Joe yet, because let's face it, both Obama and Joe Biden hate each other. However, that being said, he has been holding secret meetings with Biden to strategize on how to beat Trump, according to this report and article in Fox News. But Obama also has some anxiety over the election. He believes that this is way too close between the two and that this shouldn't be happening. Not to mention the fact that I didn't talk about this last night, but I did have an article on deck, and I wish I had gotten the link for it because I think it would have been fascinating to you folks. But I had gotten a report that inside Obama's inner circle, he's getting worried. But not for the fact of whether or not Joe Biden is going to lose. He's getting worried that when Trump wins, his ass is going to be on the line legally, meaning that Donald Trump is going to find a way to go after him. Now, what a lot of people don't seem to get is that actually older presidents, this whole Trump immunity case that is still yet to be determined by SCOTUS, actually has ramifications for older presidents. A lot of people haven't really, especially on the left, haven't really grasped this little nuance with this whole thing. If Donald Trump is stripped of his immunity, meaning that anything that he did in office he could be liable for on a criminal basis, I can almost guarantee you people are going to look back on things like Benghazi and Uranium One, all that happened within the Obama era that could potentially be illegal and criminal activity as well. So this immunity case that is on the docket in SCOTUS is, it's a very, very intricate case that is going to have a very, very big impact if SCOTUS decides to rule the wrong direction. Now, I personally think that SCOTUS maybe, but based off of today's opinion, I think is really freaking screwed up. And it calls into question whether or not SCOTUS actually really understands what they're doing here. But I personally think that SCOTUS is going to say, yes, presidents have immunity for official actions, but no immunity for actions that are considered personal, and then kick that back to the courts, the lower courts, to basically make the distinction between what is official actions and what is personal actions with regards to the Trump case. I don't think they can just blanket say there is no immunity for presidents, because if they do, that opens up people like Obama, like Bill Clinton, like the Bushes to potential, well, at least George H.W., to potential lawsuits for stuff that they did while in office. So, yeah, this is going to be interesting. But that being said, and getting back to the report, Obama believes that 2024 will actually be a nail biter, but he's avoided publicly criticizing Biden and his team, reportedly. So they've met privately on several occasions, meaning Barack Obama and President Biden, to discuss how the close confidants can save their legacy from former President Trump in 2024, according to a story from New York Magazine. The story itself is titled What Obama is Whispering to Biden. New York Magazine is behind a paywall, so I couldn't actually get that, so I have to supplement that with this. But it provides apparently detailed information about secret meals shared by the two presidents and how they can salvage 2024's election amid concerning indicators. One of Obama's friends told the outlet that while his anxiety about the election is real, the former president's concerns fall in line with the opinions of other top Democrats. Those who keep in regular contact with Obama say his concerns are not out of any underlying animosity towards Biden. Yeah, right. Or his team, but rather an acknowledgement of the country's fractured political and media landscape, according to New York Magazine. So here's the thing you got to understand. New York Magazine is a left-wing rag. It's I think it's an offshoot of the New York Times, if I recall. But anyway, they act as though Biden and Obama like each other. They don't. They do not like each other at all. And so this story being leaked kind of is interesting in the long run when it comes to what the position is. Now, if you recall, there was a video where Obama and Biden and I can't think of the third guy, but they were on stage at a fundraiser for Biden, and Obama had to grab Joe's arm and help to lead him off stage because of the fact that it looked like Biden kind of froze on stage and wasn't sure where to go, which we've all seen that look. We've all seen Joe Biden do this. But anyway, so we'll just kind of have to see. But I can tell you, Obama is kind of anxious and nervous about this. And yes, Bonnie said it was in California. You are correct. It was in California, but I can't remember who the third person was there. But anyway. So yeah, this debate and this election has so much riding on it. We're not even talking about all of the wonderful things that could go to the wayside in terms of our freedoms should this election fall back into Joe Biden's camp. But it also could have ramifications, a lot more ramifications of all of the people that Joe Biden and Obama and Donald Trump, all of the people that, hey, they have got wrapped up in this, in terms of this, and again, notice nobody's talking about Kamala Harris. Nobody really is. I mean, if you think about this, if you think about the person that should, not who, but the position should take Biden's place in the running, should he decide to step down, it should be it should be Kamala Harris, but nobody's talking about Kamala Harris because Kamala, her approval ratings are even worse than Joe's. Nobody likes her. Nobody cares about her at all. All right. Well, to add to Joe Biden's failures, let's just say, we have that wonderful Gaza pier. Do you remember that pier that he was so excited about, saying that, hey, I'm going to spend $320 million or whatever the number was to go and put this pier so that we can get aid into Gaza for the Palestinian people, who, by the way, are the people that you still voted and enjoyed and loved what Hamas did to the Israeli folks on October 7th. They still celebrated it. But anyway, so this Gaza pier is now being considered, at least according to this Washington Examiner piece, is now being considered an abject failure. So it's being called a boondoggle, a dumpster fire, a white elephant, whatever you want to call it. The project is a bona fide failure. The latest news is that the pier itself may be terminated ahead of schedule. So here's what happened. The pier got built. Weather came up. It broke it apart, scattered it all along the coast. And now they had to grab it and bring it back and tried to rebuild it. And apparently, it's millions of dollars of repairs to the thing. It was thrown back into action. Days later, forecasts of choppy waters led the military to tow the pier to a safe harbor. And then it just returned to service for a third time. Although it's not hard to believe that the project's days are numbered. That pier that he was talking about, it really, really, really was not designed to work in the environment that it was being placed in. It's a temporary pier, folks. It's designed to offload ships in a wartime situation and move their freaking crap inland and then pack up and go. It's not designed to sit in place for a extended period of time. And especially not against the storms and the weather that is potentially being done over there. It's just not. It's not designed. Now, the thing about it is that all of the challenges that they are dealing with were actually forecast well in advance, according to the piece here. This was hardly a case in which officials struggled to make sense of what former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld famously described as the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. On the contrary, the obstacles posed by Gaza's heavy seas and lack of security were obvious to anyone tracking the events. In other words, Biden and his team were operating in the easiest part of what Donald Rumsfeld would consider his matrix, the land of the known knowns. They knew about it. They knew about all of this stuff. They knew about everything. This is a freaking, it's a disaster is what it is. Just like everything else in the Biden administration. Oh, this thing is not designed to do that. And they, of course, chances are he was already told this and just ignored it because he had to get a victory. He had to get a win because that's the way Biden thinks. See, Biden doesn't care about anything other than his image and the Biden name. That's how Biden works. Biden doesn't care about you, doesn't care about your pocketbook. He doesn't care about the American people. All he cares about is himself and his power and his influence. That's it. That's all Biden cares about. And so he's going to do whatever he can to demonstrate that he has the power, he has the influence, and that he has the smarts, even though he doesn't. He's a liar, a plagiarist, and one of the lowest scoring people in his class. If you ever listen to the actual mainstream media when they were journalists back in the day, prior to his election, everybody knew this guy was an idiot. Wrong on every foreign policy situation that he had ever run across in his 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, plus years being in public service. Guy's a moron. And now he's got dementia on top of it. All right. So we have, thanks to Joe Biden and all of his wonderful spending programs, which, by the way, the CBO hasn't even bothered to add in any of Joe Biden's student loan bailouts yet, as to what that's going to do to our deficit and our debt over time, mainly because of the fact that it hasn't really been fully implemented yet. And so the CBO hasn't even added it in, but we have a bit of a problem here. We have a huge spending problem, and it also doesn't include any of the programs that that Joe Biden keeps talking about and touting. And folks, I'm sorry, but the whole idea of keeping Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, we know they're going bankrupt. We know that they are draining money faster than it can be replaced, which is exactly how this system was supposed to work. The way it was designed was that the people feeding money in would outnumber the people taking money out. It was also designed such that the money that was going in was going to be accruing interest over time and considerably increase the amount of money that would be allowed to be taken out. Well, this report, this particular article in particular from the Federalist, yeah, there we go, from the Federalist, demonstrates that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are actually cannibalizing the federal government right now. The CBO increased the estimate budget deficit for the current fiscal year by $408 billion. Okay, wait, what? Hold on, let me read that again. The CBO increased the estimated budget deficit for the current fiscal year by $408 billion. They increased the deficit. I thought Joe Biden was supposed to be lowering the deficit. I thought one of Joe Biden's claim to fame was that, hey, I decreased the deficit. But yet here we are, the CBO is basically saying that they increased it. They increased the estimated budget deficit for the current year. They also increased the 10-year budget deficit by nearly $2.1 trillion. $2.1 trillion. Add that to the already $34 trillion that we have in our deficit right now. And this is just in 10 years, folks. Or sorry, 34 trillion in debt, I should say, not deficit, but debt. So again, they revised the estimates, and it's also not showing a fiscally responsible, this report's not showing a fiscally responsible federal government. The intervening 4 months saw lawmakers digging taxpayers into an even deeper hole. So the more that Biden and Congress are spending, the more we as taxpayers are going to have to pay back. And better yet, it's not only just us, it's our offspring and our offspring's offspring, potentially our offspring's offspring's offspring. and continuing along. This is ridiculous. We have those bloated spending bills that were passed in March, which added nearly $1.3 trillion to the 10-year deficit. We have higher spending this fiscal year, which is leading the CBO to assume that spending will continue at those higher levels in the future. Spending on Medicaid and Obamacare subsidies, so here's the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, subsidies will increase deficits by $511 billion in the coming decade. The large part because more people will continue to sign up for the free coverage. Now, remember I talked about that article where we had they had blocked some of the preventative care. The federal judge had blocked some of the preventative care. That might help save us a little bit if we can get that passed through the courts. But anyway, the budget office, the CBO, also noted that the recent surge in immigration, illegal aliens, has made more people than the CBO previously estimated eligible for Obamacare subsidies, accounting for an increase in projected enrollment. Now, I told you earlier that they hadn't quite added everything up yet. Well, their current estimation for all of Biden's student loan forgiveness is causing the deficit to potentially grow by 145 billion. That's right, billion with a B, this fiscal year alone, because the administration has not finalized several of its regulatory proposals. The CBO has yet to put the full fiscal effect of these giveaways into the federal government's books. See, here's the thing, okay? And I'm being pushed to get another drink here, so hold on. So here's the thing with this whole student loan forgiveness. Like I've been telling people over and over and over again, you cannot just abolish debt. The debt still has to be paid. It has to be paid by someone. And so if you take that burden away from the loan borrower, you put it back onto the taxpayer in this particular case. And this is why we sit here and argue over the fact that all Biden is doing with these loan forgiveness programs is just handing out money and putting the burden back on the American taxpayer to backfill it. Because again, government does not make anything. They cannot give someone anything without taking it from somebody else. That's the way this works. That's the way our taxes work. The only reason that the government operates is because they have to take money from us, the American taxpayers, in order to be able to afford all of the things that they do. And if the spending keeps going under the Biden administration, if we get 4 more years of this guy, oh my Lord, I can't even imagine what's going to happen with this whole situation. Now, here's another thing that is concerning, okay, which is essentially that for many years, especially shortly after we went away from the gold standard, and maybe even slightly before, but one of the things that has been going on throughout the world, I should say, is the fact that the U.S. dollar, and this is something that the leftists don't seem to get, because they seem to think that the economies of the world are doing much worse than the economy of America, and they are, admittedly, but what they don't seem to understand is that what they don't seem to understand is that the world's economy utilizes the US dollar as a reserve currency. Now, I reported not too long ago about how Saudi Arabia did not bother to renew the US dollar as the oil, the petrol dollar, essentially, in terms of that entire situation. They didn't bother to renew the 50-year petrol dollar contract that usually comes with the US dollar. But what's even worse is that's not the only ones. Those aren't the only ones that are de-dollarizing. Take a look at this in the Federalist. If Biden's economy were as strong as what they keep talking about, then our trade partners wouldn't be running from the dollar. And it's talking about the U.S.-Saudi agreement designating the U.S. dollar as the global trade currency for oil sales is over, furthering this de-dollarization. So this is just one, but there's also been several other countries that have been trying to get themselves into some sort of a collaboration, some sort of a commission or whatever, and they have been shying away from the dollar and using the dollar as a reserve currency or a common currency between, so they can trade on a common currency and a common value. This is the first time that this has happened in decades that this has even come into play. Now, the piece here in the Federalist points out that the U.S. dollar was essentially the gold standard of the global oil trade. Now this is no more, renewing concerns about de-dollarization in the future of the American economy. So oil exporters, according to Investopedia, oil exporters settle sales in U.S. dollars because the dollar is the most widely used currency, making it easier for them to invest export proceeds. But last year, the Heritage Foundation blamed U.S. sanctions for the continued decline of the dollar. Economist Peter St. Onge noted that unprecedented U.S. sanctions against Russia, designed as retribution for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, have been driving friendly countries from Brazil to Saudi Arabia away from the dollar and into the arms of the BRICS coalition of anti-dollar nations, which is led by who? Oh yeah, China! That's right. Which is exactly what China's been looking for. China has been trying to devalue the dollar and take over as the world's global currency. Now, St. Onge continues here. He says, thanks to this concentrated push by China, the dollar's share in global commerce is plunging. Today, only 40% of world trade is settled in U.S. dollars, down from 52% just a decade ago. Ben Steele, S-T-E-I-L, Director of International Economics at the Council of Foreign Relations, concurred that, quote, the biggest threat to the dollar's dominance comes not from competitive alternatives, but from the U.S. government itself. U.S.-led sanctions created economic hardship for other nations, leading those countries to reduce their engagement with the U.S. financial system. So here's the thing, people. Yes, America has been a long-standing American basis for the world to operate on, in terms of the fact that the dollar has been, relatively speaking, a fairly solid performer. But because of what Joe Biden is doing in office, destabilizing the dollar in conjunction with things like what these people are talking about, that has allowed for an opening for China to come in and be able to take over as the world's currency. Now, I got to ask one question, because Biden has been linked, and I'm not just talking about Joe, but I'm also talking about Hunter Biden, has been linked to working with China in terms of doing business deals and working with the CCP on stuff. What makes you think that maybe Joe might be being called in on some of those favors that he's been doing for China and set this up? I mean, not saying that Joe is that smart. He probably isn't, but chances are what's happening here is he is taking direction from somebody. Now, BRICS, BRICS, which is the coalition with regards to the anti-dollar, they are pushing even more for de-dollarization across the board. And it's growing. This influence is growing. And the more trouble that we have with it, with inflation, record high mortgage rates here, uncertain job markets here, because remember, inflation is actually the devaluation of the dollar. Okay. That's what inflation is. It takes more dollars to buy the same thing today as it did, or same thing. Yeah, to buy the same thing today as it did, 10, 12, 14 years ago, even 4 years ago under Joe Biden. And so all of this is causing some serious economic headaches across the entire world. This is a huge problem. Now, that being said, do I think this is necessarily going to destabilize everything? Probably not. But the more that we stay in this stagflation economy that we've been given by Joe Biden, because let's face it, right after COVID, our economy was essentially set up by the Trump administration to roar back without any problems. And what did Joe Biden do the minute he gets into office? He all of a sudden floods the market with all kinds of money. Because remember, the definition of inflation is too many dollars facing too few goods. And that is exactly what is happening right now. That we need to stop our spending. We need to cut it back. We need to start taking that away. And unfortunately, believe it or not, during the Reagan era, most people don't understand this, but as soon as Reagan got into office, the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates to the point where we saw not only double-digit inflation, but we actually saw double-digit interest rates too. We saw interest rates in, the teens and, dare I say, into the low 20s. We may end up being in that same situation here again, repeating history once again in terms of our course correction that should be coming under the Trump administration, should we get into these positions. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand is they take a look at that 3.5% that we're running under, roughly, or 3.9%, whatever it happens to be. It's over 3%, I know that much, from May. I think it's 3.4 or 3.39 or something like that. But anyway, what a lot of people don't understand is that inflation is actually taking its toll, not just in the percentage that you see as part of the consumer price index, which, by the way, that particular one neglects to add in things like food, housing, and fuel, the three most common things that people need, necessities, in order to survive. However, there are other things that affect inflation. Joe Biden actually kind of hinted on it at the State of the Union. He was talking about shrinkflation. That is one thing that can happen. In other words, what you were able to buy even last year may have gotten even less than this year. The price goes up at the same time that the amount that you're getting goes down. That's called shrinkflation. And this commentary piece in the Epoch Times, for those of you who are not on the video portion of the program, although I highly suggest that you run over to rumble.com, get yourself an account and sign up. It's free. And then, of course, watch or follow the American Perspective channel. For those of you that are on the audio program, this is a commentary piece in the Epoch Times where the author was at a restaurant and it's by Jeffrey Tucker. So he ordered a dish of Mediterranean prawns that sounded delicious by the description. The reality was a huge pile of croutons and 4 shrimp sitting on top, which basically came out to about $8 per shrimp, according to his total cost. So, So it's disappointing, but he basically is blaming, according to the piece here, the author is blaming a restaurant or the reality of doing business in a high inflation environment. Well, this is exactly what happens all over the place. We're seeing less being served, smaller portions being served for higher prices. And this is exactly a unseen angle of inflation that a lot of people don't seem to understand and don't seem to get. See, the left seems to think that businesses just have all this extra money that they can just throw around. Let me guarantee you on this, which is essentially, okay, that businesses are a pass-through when it comes to money. They are. They're what it would be considered as a value-added reseller, to use an industry term, in any particular sense of the word. So what they do is they take raw materials or raw goods and they turn it into something that you want to buy. And in between there, in between the place between the raw goods and your finalized product is essentially a transformation of that raw good and the addition of things that are called in the Economics 101 world, the cost of goods and services that are added into the final price that you as the consumer pay. So you have the cost of the raw materials, you have the cost of the labor that it takes to make those materials, plus the cost of any machines that are amortized across all of the produced product, plus any taxes or any other fees and other things that are associated to this that are added in. And all of that turns into a price to you. And so when those things change, whether it be the cost of the raw materials, whether it be the addition of taxes or cost of regulations in the form of things like having to upgrade equipment or put specific pieces of equipment on in order to comply with EPA regulations, and so on and so forth. And also, not to mention the cost of the labor involved, the cost of their benefits, all of that stuff. When any of those items change, this price over here changes as well. And so this is why the left doesn't seem to understand this, because they don't understand Economics 101. They don't get the fact that businesses don't just have a pile of money that they're sitting on all the time. In fact, there was a piece in Reuters that basically proved this, that the profit margins hadn't changed, but prices went up due to the fact that the costs went up. It was almost an exact match. The profit margin hadn't changed at all. And so this is what happens. And people don't seem to get this. People who don't understand simple business and economics 101. And so what you end up with is things like where companies are trying to cut costs in order to remain somewhat competitive, but they're doing it in ways that are invisible to the idea of the inflationary numbers that you see running around and talked about by the government. These are all things that are an impact for stuff such as what the Biden administration is pushing. Yep. Oh, and Jarhead 13 over on Rumble says, if you calculate the tax on every step of production and then add all of those added up together, you get what is essentially called the European Value Added Tax, or VAT tax. Well, he's not wrong. They're going to get it sooner or later. I mean, somebody has got to pay for all of that. Somebody has got to pay for all of that. And that's the thing that the left and people like Joe Biden, who have never run a business or never been in the private sector world to understand what is happening with our economy. Well, it's part of that whole lack of understanding of Econ 101 that has caused consumer confidence to dip a little bit this June. So here in the Washington Examiner, consumer confidence dips in June amid economic unease. And that's because of the fact that a lot of people are expressing growing pessimism for the short-term prospects for the economy. So the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index fell to 100.4, down from 101.3 the month before, the group announced on Tuesday. So once again, another warning signal to Joe Biden, who has been trying to shore up support for his handling of the economy. He can talk all a good game, but those of us who are in the know understand this. Now, the index that gauges consumers' assessment of the labor market and business conditions increased from last month, although the headline number was dragged down by the expectations index, which is based on consumers' short-term outlook for income, business, and labor market conditions. That index fell to 7.3, which in June, which it was at 74.5 in May. I'm sorry, did I say 7.3? It was 73 in June, and it came down from 74.5 in May. Now, generally speaking, if that index is lower than 80, it signals a recession ahead, according to the Conference Board. It's been in a recession warning territory for some 5 months. 5 months. Folks, we're in a cycle of what's called stagflation. That's what we're in. We're not in a recession, but we're in what is called stagflation, which essentially means that the economic numbers are kind of staying about the same. They're crappy, but they're about the same. And that's essentially where we're at. And there's nothing that the Biden administration is doing in order to be able to pull us out of this. They're just not doing it. No matter how many times they keep talking about how things are better, which, by the way, Karine Jean-Pierre, I don't know if anybody saw this, but the worst press secretary of any press secretary of the entire United States history, Sideshow Bob herself, Karine Jean-Pierre, said the other day that grocery prices have been lowering. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know where she gets this idea that they are. Every time I look at her, by the way, just side note, every time I look at her, she looks like she's one of those toilet brushes. That's bad. It's her whole hair thing. I'm telling you, it just is, but whatever. Anyway, so that's our wonderful economy. Hey, you remember not too long ago, I did a full many day expose of the fact that illegals are voting in registering to vote for sure, but are potentially voting in our elections? Well, one of the things that came about from all of that is all the studies with regards to the motor voter law in 1993, where what they were doing is essentially having a checkbox on a form, and that checkbox basically says, do you certify that you are a U.S. citizen? And somebody could mistakenly or not read it, not understand English, and just go ahead and hit the checkbox, whatever it is, and get registered to vote. And it's because of the fact that the states, for the most part, not every state, but many states, don't bother to check for citizenship before they sign people up. Well, guess what? California is one of those states that doesn't bother. This in the Federalist. I wish I had this article back when I was doing that expose or that series of shows. But Californians apparently who don't have a driver's license or a social security number can use a credit card or a gym membership to vote. Really? Seriously. In California, apparently, voters that don't have a driver's license or a social security number or social security card can just use pretty much whatever they want. I just can't even believe this. And in fact, they even give a image here in the piece that talks about it. Where you can check, I do not have a driver's license or California identification card, or I don't have a social security number. And if an applicant apparently checks both of those boxes, they would later be prompted to provide other identifications, such as pretty much anything that they want. And this comes directly from the California Secretary of State. They told the Federalist that's what happens. And upon further inquiry, the office representative said individuals could provide proof of identity by showing items such as a credit card, a utility bill, or even their damn gym membership. Seriously? And you are sitting here telling me that our elections are secure. Really? Our elections are secure when this can be done. So, yeah. So apparently the writer, let's see, what is his name? Her name, Brianna Lyman, said that she called back for additional clarification, and the woman that had answered the call told them that they were informed not to speak to the press, and they are supposed to send an email. The email directed the writer to a state statute that lists the number of acceptable documents with which voters who have no social security number or driver's license may prove their identity. The list includes a health club identification card or other identification card provided by a commercial establishment, a credit card or debit card, student ID, bank statement, utility bill, an insurance card, or even a sample ballot. Wait, a sample ballot? The office noted that there are documents that can be used to verify California residents' identity, but not citizenship. Huh? And this is essentially connected to the Help America Vote Act, HAVA. And HAVA requires states to check information about people registering to vote in federal elections against each individual's information that is stored in the state's DMV database. If an individual lacks a driver's license, then another system is designed to verify the voter information against Social Security records. Notably, neither an SSN or driver's license confirms citizenship, since foreign nationals can obtain either one. Yeah. So, again, I'm sorry, but I'm just telling you right now that this whole policy is absurd. The SAVE Act, which was put forth by the House of Representatives just this year, would have resolved all of this stuff, would have made all of this irrelevant, because you would have had to shown and proven citizenship before being allowed to register to vote. To me, it seems like you would want to have that proof before you put them on the voter registration rolls, because otherwise all you're doing is just sending out a whole bunch of what are supposed to be secure ballots out to ineligible voters from the get-go. And rather than sitting there trying to filter out people who aren't supposed to vote, you would have already done so in the beginning. And you wouldn't necessarily have mistakes made. So you should be checking for citizenship prior to signing somebody up to register to one of the most important things that an American citizen can do, which is vote. Yeah. And again, I'm just going to point out that as far as I'm concerned, the way that the federal government can actually resolve all of this, for the most part, not going to say it's foolproof, but this is just a simplistic idea from a simplistic American who basically would say that, hey, everyone who is an American citizen, when you hit 18 voting age, you automatically get a U.S. passport. That U.S. passport is given to you because of the fact that you have proven by birth certificate that you are an American citizen. That U.S. passport should be the only acceptable ID to go to vote. And by the way, none of that should cost the American people at all. We spend so much money on all this other extraneous crap that isn't even in the Constitution. That we could, I think, monetarily wise, we could do that for all American citizens. But that's just my opinion, and I'm just a simplistic American. All right, let's get on to tonight's pet of the week. And tonight's pet of the week has been submitted by B. Patrick 1369, also known as Bonnie, over on Rumble. And yes, buddy, I did get your email just to, but I'm holding it in reserve until I don't get a pet for pet of the week. All right, so here's the limited story that we have on Landon Elvis. So apparently Landon Elvis is like the hardest working dog that I have ever seen in my life. Landon Elvis is incredibly hardworking. I mean, he is so hardworking. I am so envious of this dog. He works so hard at what he does throughout the day. This dog, I'm telling you, this dog, he is just so impressive with how hard he works every single day of his. Apparently he's looking at me right now, according to Bonnie. He's looking at me because I'm saying his name. That's why. But anyway, he works so hard that he likes to work from home. He likes to work from his office when Dad is not home. He likes to work from a dog bed when Bonnie talks to her supervisor, and he works hard in the office. Let me just show you how hard this pup is working. Let me just show you how hard this pup works. This pup works so hard, incredibly hard. Look at it. Look at him. Just look at him. He is working so incredibly hard. I can't even imagine how hard this pup works. This pup is such a hardworking pup. He really, really is. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, look at this. He is so hardworking. He is just, he's, you know what his job is? His job. He is so hardworking. His job is to check the comfort on all of the locations that he decides to lay in. Check out how hard he is working here. He's checking out the comfort of that dog bed. He is checking out the comfort of the carpet that is under the dog bed. He is checking out the comfort of this chair. He has got to make sure that the chair is comfortable for his humans who come and sit in the chair. So he checks out the comfort of the chair there. He is, I started off this whole thing and I didn't even tell you what he does. Landon Elvis is the comfort quality control specialist of the Patrick household. That's his job. He's the quality control specialist of comfort. Check this out. He's checking out the comfort of the bed. I swear, this dog is probably the hardest working dog I think I have ever seen in my entire life. Oh, Bonnie, I gotta tell you, my dog Angus could probably give poor Landon a run for his money. But anyway, Landon Elvis doing his work all over the house, making sure that everybody gets comfortable on his watch. Not one person can say that they are uncomfortable in the Patrick household, because Landon Elvis makes absolutely certain that there is 100% comfort everywhere. And apparently he's got, at least according to Tommy, he's got some big feet. Now, you know that if you have big feet, anyway. Thank you for submitting Landon Elvis for Pet of the Week. That is awesome. I appreciate it. He looks like a very comfortable dog. I'm just going to tell you. It's just wonderful. All right. Oh, if you would like to submit your pet for Pet of the Week, you can do so by sending me pictures or even video. I do video every once in a while. And some sort of a story. Obviously, some of the details on the animal in question. You can send all of that to. Fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online. And don't forget also, I do a segment called Question of the Week, which is on Saturday nights, and the final question there. I don't think I have one for this week, so make sure to get those questions in. And even if I do, it'll just go in the queue. It's fine. Anyway, all right. So tomorrow night, I am planning on simulcasting the debate after my show. Considering that the debate is supposed to start at 9, I'll probably go ahead and do an attempt at a normal show, and then we'll just slide into the debates. But anyway, we'll just kind of have to play it by ear. So tomorrow night's not going to be all that stylized, but hey, whatever. A lot of people are doing it, and apparently CNN is basically trying to prevent people from doing it. So I don't know how they're going to stop people, because this is like fair use laws and stuff like that, but whatever. So anyway, if you want color commentary from me, head on over to our channel, to the American Perspective channel, and you'll get it throughout the debate, or maybe even just during the commercial breaks. But anyway, otherwise, we will see you tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time, right here on American Perspective. Thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.